Christmas Eve, Havana, 1841. The iron pot hisses, butter spitting like molten gold. A wooden spoon scrapes against blackened metal, steady as a drumbeat. The figure stirs in silence, except for the faint lullaby escaping her lips. Sweet, almost tender. From behind a shuttered door, 3 muffled cries rise, desperate, frantic. Chains rattle against floorboards. Candlelight flickers like restless ghosts on the wall. The lullaby doesn't stop. The pot spits louder. The cries weaken, low and grave. At the stroke of midnight, Havana would never be the same. This was not murder. It was judgment. The sun sagged low over Havana's outskirts, painting the sugarcane fields in molten gold and shadow. Heat clung to every surface. Wooden shutters warped, iron tools radiated warmth, the air thick with molasses and sweat. Overseers' whistles pierced the haze, slicing through the chatter of laborers bending beneath the weight of cane. Diego Ramos leaned against the fence post, crooked lantern swinging from one hand, its dim flame wobbling. His eyes traced every shadow. A boy stumbled past, carrying bundles of cane. Diego's voice was gravel and silence. "Careful. Don't drop a stalk. Don't breathe wrong." The boy flinched, scuttled onward. Diego spat, eyes narrowing toward the distant mansion. Ivory cane glimpsed through the veranda. The whispers of the household reached even here, carried by the wind. He murmured to himself, low, almost a prayer. The Ruiz household, always the same. Near the riverbank, Isabel scrubbed laundry in her basin. The water foamed, then darkened as if the fabric had absorbed blood. She froze, knuckles white around the wooden paddle. Did I see that?" she whispered. She leaned closer. Nothing moved, but a chill ran up her spine. Rumors had been threading through the town like smoke. The colonel's children, especially Santiago, were cruel, merciless even to their own servants, Isabel. Diego's voice, cautious, carried over the reeds. "What troubles you so?" Her eyes met his. "The water, it turned red. I thought it was the sun. But," she broke off, shivering. The whispering. "Last night, they fear something, or someone." Diego lifted his lantern higher. Shadows danced across the cane. "We see, we hear, but we do not speak, not yet, not until the moment chooses us." Above them, a bell tolled from the Spanish garrison in town. Discipline was everywhere. Soldiers patrolling, slaves kneeling, overseers lording over every step. Catholic prayers mingled with whips. Devotion masked cruelty. The people bent, bowed, and whispered stories of punishment so severe, even their shadows trembled. Isabel's hand shook over the basin. "They say the colonel keeps his cane sharp, his eyes sharper, that he measures obedience in scars." Diego's gaze hardened. "And the sons? Santiago, Mateo, the youngest, they follow in his shadow, learning the same hunger for fear." A breeze stirred, carrying the faint echo of a child's cry from the mansion. Isabel recoiled. "It comes from inside, from the house." Diego's lantern caught a glimmer of silver at her wrist, an old heirloom glinting, worn from years of labor. A talisman, small and defiant against the weight of the estate. "Eyes and ears," he murmured, almost approving. "We survive by seeing, by hearing." They lingered in silence. Whistles, cries, and whispers intertwined, a tapestry of heat, oppression, and unspoken violence. Somewhere within the shadowed house, chains clinked softly against wood, and the rumors, the stories of cruelty and fear, they were only beginning to stir. The kitchen smelled of smoke and sugar. Pots clanged, and the low hum of fire beneath the hearth was constant, like a heartbeat. Maria Alvarez knelt on the worn wooden floor, calloused hands kneading dough, voice rising in a soft, melodic chant. Her lullaby, taught by her mother, floated above the clamor. "She hums like a church hymn," Anna whispered to herself, coughing into a thin linen handkerchief. The seamstress's hands trembled as she stitched a torn sleeve. "One day it may save her, or curse her." Maria paused, glancing at the silver cross around her neck. It was warm against her skin, a token from Anna before the cough took her completely. "Maria," a harsh voice called from the veranda, "bring the bread, girl, and make it quick." Colonel Esteban Ruiz stood framed in the doorway, black cane tipped with ivory in hand. He measured her with narrow eyes, the sunlight catching the ivory like judgment itself. "I do not ask twice," he said. Each word sounded like a whip. "Time is wasted in hesitation." Maria swallowed, adjusting her small apron. Yes, Colonel. Her hands shook, yet the cross rested heavily, grounding her. In the shadows, Santiago Ruiz watched. Eldest son, prideful heir, always polishing his boots until the leather shone like mirrors. He hummed the same lullaby Maria sang, his lips curling into a mocking smirk. "Hush now, girl," he taunted. "You'll choke on your own song." The kitchen filled with tension. Anna coughed, a fragile sound against the harsh clang of utensils. "Do not coddle her, mother," the colonel snapped. "Property must learn its place, and if it does not, the cane will speak." Maria remembered the first time she felt it. Age 10, caught stealing bread from the storeroom. Santiago had stood beside her, laughing. "Poor thing thinks she can taste the world," he whispered as the whip struck. Maria's knees hit the dirt. Tears mingled with flour. But she remembered the lullaby, hummed softly between lashes. "The cross burned against her chest. Why do you cry?" Santiago mocked later, his voice sweet with cruelty. "Humming to no one? Your song is yours alone, isn't it?" Maria didn't answer. She didn't run. She didn't beg. She memorized each detail, the sound of the whip, the ache in her back, the cold glint of the cane. Chains of fear wound around her like invisible ropes. Anna, coughing one final time, pressed the cross into Maria's palm. "Hold it close," she whispered. "It is the only part of me the world cannot steal." Then she was gone, leaving Maria with the echo of her mother's voice, the kitchen's fire, and a weighty silence. The plantation hummed with life outside, yet for Maria, every shadow carried the presence of Colonel Ruiz. He passed through rooms like a storm, black cane tapping the floor, eyes sharp as a hawk. "Efficiency," he said always, "is measured in scars and sweat. Do not forget that, girl." Santiago lingered in doorways, observing her, memorizing every misstep, every whispered note of the lullaby. Pride twisted his cruelty, teaching him to measure power in humiliation. Maria learned patience. She learned fire, how to coax a flame without burning herself, how to stir a pot without spilling. Every lesson in the kitchen was a lesson in survival. She memorized the cadence of footsteps, the flicker of candlelight on the colonel's ivory cane, the way chains rattled when doors closed too sharply, and she hummed, always hummed. The lullaby was a seed of defiance, tiny but persistent, growing under oppression. "You'll forget your place one day," Santiago said once, polishing boots until they shone brighter than the afternoon sun. "And when you do, I'll remember your song." Maria smiled faintly, a line of hope threading her lips. Chains, whistles, cane, and fire surrounded her, but the silver cross against her chest pulsed with something more. Faith, memory, a promise of reckoning. Outside, the wind stirred the cane fields. Somewhere beyond the kitchens, the plantation held its breath, waiting for what this girl, calloused hands, hymn-like voice, and a silver cross would become. The afternoons were long and heavy, dripping with heat and the scent of cane. Maria wiped sweat from her brow, balancing a tray of sugar cakes, when a soft whistle carried from the stables. She turned, and there was Fernando, harmonica tucked into his belt, hands steady as he leaned against the stool. "Your song again?" she asked, brushing a stray lock of hair from her eyes. Fernando grinned, cheeks flushed. "Only for you." "The horses won't mind." Maria felt a flutter in her chest, a dangerous warmth she had not named. She passed him a piece of bread stolen from the kitchens. He accepted it, fingers brushing hers, lingering just long enough to ignite a spark neither dared speak aloud. They met in shadows and corners, behind stacks of firewood, where the colonel's eyes could not see. Fernando hummed, she sang. The lullaby that Santiago had once twisted into cruelty became theirs, a secret symphony in defiance of the plantation's weight. "Do you think we'll ever leave this place?" Maria whispered one evening, eyes on the silver cross glinting against her chest. Fernando tilted his head, harmonica dangling. "If we survive, yes. One day, but for now, we endure." In the kitchen, Lucia moved silently, fingers tracing the worn edges of cupboards. "Keys are not always where they hang," she murmured, eyes sharp, voice soft but unyielding. "And some doors should stay closed until the time is right." Maria observed her, noting the way she carried the scars of her own survival, a healed cut across her forearm, faded but permanent. Trust had teeth here. Secrets were currency. Meanwhile, the household's balance of cruelty shifted subtly. Mateo Ruiz, second son, ink-stained fingers, ledger always at hand, leaned over a counter, eyes calculating. "You think obedience is enough?" he sneered, flipping coins idly. Money can fix what fear cannot, and fear is profitable. Fernando approached, offering a broom to clear the floor. Mateo's eyes glinted with mischief. "A gift or a trap?" he asked, voice smooth. "Let us see how clever you are." That night, Fernando was accused of stealing coins from the colonel's desk. He swore innocence. Maria pleaded. "I saw him near the ledger," Mateo said, voice sweet, poisonous. He wanted to feel the weight of wealth. As if he were a man, the whip cracked. Fernando fell, arms raised, back seared, teeth gritted against the pain. Maria clutched her cross, trembling, but said nothing. Chains of silence wrapped her heart, knotting with anger. Lucia pressed a hand to Maria's arm. "The world will test you. Observe, remember." One day, her eyes flicked to the colonel's cane, black and tipped with ivory, a symbol of ever-present authority. "First you will act." Fernando lay groaning, yet whispered through clenched teeth, "I'm alive. We survive." Maria looked away, letting the lullaby rise in her mind. It became a shield, a seed of vengeance buried under patience. Each cruelty, each calculated humiliation by the Ruiz sons, sank into her memory like ink. She did not speak. She did not retaliate, yet the fire in her chest grew hotter, quieter, unrelenting. Mateo counted his coins, satisfied, oblivious to the silent oath forming in Maria's heart. The stolen glances between her and Fernando, the whispered hints of escape, the knowledge of hidden keys, all threads woven into a tapestry of planning. At dusk, Maria sat by the stables, the cross cool against her chest, and whispered softly, "One day, justice will hum louder than fear." The plantation seemed to hold its breath. Even the cane fields swayed without wind. Somewhere in the shadows, the seeds of vengeance were quietly taking root. The grand hall smelled of roasted meat and wax. Christmas lights flickered, candles trembling in golden holders. The Ruiz family gathered, laughter stiff as iron. Maria knelt at the side, barefoot on cold stone, carrying a tray of wine. Santiago Ruiz hovered behind her, polished boots scraping the floor. His grin gleamed sharper than the silver on the table. "Careful now, girl," he hissed. "We wouldn't want you spilling our fortune." Maria's hands shook. The wine sloshed. She dropped a glass. Red liquid ran over her fingers, glinting in candlelight like blood. The hall went silent for a heartbeat. "Clumsy," Santiago mocked, voice sharp. He leaned close, humming her lullaby with cruel precision. "Do you hear it, everyone? She sings even in shame." Fernando limped forward, eyes burning, ribs still tender from past punishments. "Leave her be," he said, voice hoarse. Colonel Esteban Ruiz turned slowly, ivory-tipped cane tapping the floor. Shadows stretched across the walls. "Fernando," he said, voice calm but deadly. "You dare speak? Chains now." Two guards grabbed Fernando and he stumbled, arms shackled. He hissed through gritted teeth. She did nothing. Isabel, kneeling near the kitchen doorway, pressed a hand over her mouth. Diego's lantern swung back and forth, casting quivering light. Lucia's fingers tightened on a hidden key ring beneath her apron. All three whispered prayers, powerless to intervene. "Mercy is for men, not for property," Colonel Ruiz sneered, ivory cane raised. He let it strike the floor beside Maria's knees. "You will learn, girl, that obedience has a price." Maria's palm pressed against her silver cross. The metal burned through skin, blood rising where the edges dug in. Pain and fury mingled, a fire igniting deep in her chest. Her eyes, wide but steady, followed Fernando as he was dragged to the wall, chains rattling. Gabriel Ruiz, the youngest, watched from the table. Childlike, innocent, he shrank behind a chair, clutching a napkin as if it could shield him from the cruelty around him. His pale face quivered, a reflection of what fear could do when born too early. "Stay there," Colonel barked at Gabriel, who ducked lower. "Learn well. Every shadow in this room is a lesson." Maria exhaled slowly, whispering under her breath, words almost lost in the crackle of the hearth. "Then mercy shall not be for you." The firelight danced across the silver cross, catching the drops of blood on her palm, illuminating a vow that would not fade. Her gaze lingered on Santiago's smirk, on the colonel's calm menace, and then on the helpless innocence of Gabriel. A web of memory and fury twisted tight. Outside, the cane fields swayed in the wind. Inside, the hall smelled of wine, fear, and wood smoke. The echoes of chains, the muffled moans, the sinister lullaby humming in memory. These sounds became a rhythm, a heartbeat of vengeance forming in the quiet. While everyone else watched, too afraid to act, the room stilled. The moment crystallized. Maria did not cry. She did not beg. She did not run. Her vow hung in the air, heavy as the colonel's cane and sharp as Santiago's laughter. The seeds of her reckoning had taken root, and the Christmas Eve that began with spilled wine would not end in silence. The kitchen was quiet, except for the low hiss of butter melting in a heavy iron pot. Maria stirred slowly, humming the lullaby that had once been twisted into mockery. The flame flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls like restless spirits. Lucia leaned against the doorway, eyes alert. "The herbs?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Maria nodded, fingers brushing the dried leaves she had crushed earlier. "To mask the scent. The smoke must not betray me." Lucia glanced at the hidden alcove where small vials and letters were stashed. "Be careful. One slip, and the whole house knows before dawn." Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of boots. Santiago passed the doorway, polishing his cane, humming a distorted version of Maria's lullaby. She froze, heart pounding. He paused, sniffed the air and moved on, dismissing the faint scent of herbs. Earlier that day, she had visited Padre Joaquin. The old priest sat in the dim chapel, one eye clouded, the other sharp and knowing. "Maria," he said, voice gravelly, "you carry a storm within you. It will burn if you let it. I need it," she whispered, clutching her silver cross. "Justice. Mercy will not reach them." Padre Joaquin leaned closer. "The fire you carry is not without cost. Beware the chains you forge with your own hands. One eye sees, but even sightless hearts can betray you." Later, in the garden maze behind the mansion, Doña Teresa waited. Widow, wealthy, adorned in lace, with fingers steeped in gossip and knowledge of herbs and arsenic. "Children must be taught," she said, tapping a small jar with her ring. "Some lessons are sweeter." And final, Maria accepted the vial, studying it. "It will work. Only if you respect it," Doña Teresa said, eyes glittering. "Mistakes leave traces." Back in the kitchen, Maria practiced every step in secret. Butter boiled, herbs steeped. The scent was pungent but masked. Lucia helped hide the evidence, letters, vials, scraps of cloth. Every movement rehearsed, every glance calculated. Fernando appeared at the doorway, limping slightly from past flogging. He studied her face. "Once fire begins, it consumes all," he warned softly. Maria looked at him, then down at the bubbling pot. "I know," she said, voice steady. "But some chains cannot be broken without burning." That night she stirred the mixture while humming the lullaby. Shadows clung to her like old fears, but her movements were precise, methodical. Every note, every stir, a rhythm of vengeance forming in silence. Santiago nearly caught her once, leaning into the kitchen doorway, eyes narrowing. "What are you hiding?" he hissed. Maria froze, heart pounding. A scrap of paper fell from her apron. She snatched it, smiling faintly as he shrugged and left, uninterested. Mateo entered minutes later, sniffing the air, frowning. "Strange scent? Herbs?" he muttered, dismissing it with a wave. The ledger in his hands drew his attention elsewhere. Lucia whispered, "Too close. You must be more careful." Maria only hummed, the lullaby rising louder now, stronger, carrying through the silent house. It was a signal, a rhythm for Fernando and Lucia, a reminder of the plan forming in shadows. Every night she repeated the ritual. Stir, hum, hide, observe. Every movement rehearsed like a dance, every sound recorded in memory. Outside, the plantation slept under a heavy moon. The canes swayed like silent witnesses. Inside, the air thickened with smoke, butter, and the faint trace of herbs. Fire waited, silent but ready. Chains rattled faintly in the corridors, reminders of the oppression that had birthed this careful preparation. By the end of the week, Maria had memorized every patrol, every footstep, every glance from the Ruiz children. She knew when to hide, when to act, when to let the lullaby rise. The plot was no longer a thought. It had become a rhythm, a pulse, a heartbeat that could not be ignored. Fernando touched her hand once as he left. "Remember," he said softly, "it will not only burn for them." Maria did not reply. She only turned to the simmering pot, silver cross glinting in the flickering firelight, and hummed louder. The fire within her had begun, and nothing could stop it. The grand hall smelled of roasted meat and burning wax. Candles flickered, their flames trembling against gilded walls. Christmas Eve music floated from the corner where a small band played, drunken guests swaying to the rhythm of rum and laughter. The Ruiz family presided over it all, polished smiles masking entitlement and cruelty. Maria moved silently in the kitchen, heavy iron pots simmering on the hearth. Butter, golden and thick, hissed like molten gold. Herbs masked the scent, and the aroma of sugar and spice mixed with something sharper. Anticipation, quiet and lethal. Lucia lingered near the doorway, eyes scanning the hall. "Shutters?" she whispered. Maria locked each window, chains bolted firmly into the wood. Diego stationed himself at the far end, lantern trembling in his hands. "All clear. Until they hear the first scream," he muttered. The colonel entered the hall, cane tapping the marble. Santiago followed, boots echoing like gunshots. Mateo carried his ledger, smirking, while Gabriel trailed behind, timid, eyes wide. "Serve us well, girl," Colonel Ruiz barked, voice calm, venom beneath. "Do not drop a tray or remember the last time you did." Maria approached with a pot, hands steady, hiding the boiling butter beneath the cloth cover. She moved past the first tables, then the second, heart pounding but slow, deliberate. Every step calculated, every breath measured. Santiago leaned forward, smirking. "What is this, a gift for the colonel?" he asked, mocking, catching a whiff of something faint. He shrugged. "Smells odd." Mateo sniffed, fingers tapping his ledger. "Spices, perhaps?" The kitchens are always hiding something. Maria's hands clenched under the cloth. The lullaby hummed in her mind, rising in tempo, matching her pulse. The moment came. She stepped forward, tipped the pot. Golden liquid hissed, spitting like fire onto the table and then onto the colonel's legs. The hall froze in shock before chaos erupted. Santiago's scream tore through the music as he tried to jerk away. Maria pressed him down with both hands. "You called me property. Tonight I am fire." Mateo stumbled back, arms flailing. Butter spatters clung to his sleeves. His ledger fell, pages smeared and ruined. Gabriel screamed, tiny hands reaching for the silver cross around Maria's neck. "Stop!" he cried, eyes wide, terrified. Maria hesitated, gaze flicking toward him. But then the chains rattled outside. The sound of Fernando's shackles, muffled but unmistakable, echoing through the hall. Reminder of their oppression, their suffering, the cost already paid. Her fingers tightened on the pot. Boiling butter poured again, covering the colonel and his sons. Screams collided with the crash of silverware and the thud of boots. Ivory cane skittered across the floor. The smell of scorched flesh and melted fat filled the air. Candle flames danced like wild spirits on the walls, reflections of fire that could not be contained. Guests shrieked, stumbling over tables and chairs. Isabel's cry cut through the chaos. "No, stop it!" Diego slammed doors behind fleeing visitors, keeping the hall enclosed in the storm of Maria's making. The lullaby escaped her lips, low and steady, threading through the screams, wrapping the violence in memory. Every note was a tether to the past, a signal that the girl who once knelt, barefoot and trembling, had become the force of reckoning. Santiago tried to crawl toward the doorway, face twisted in agony. Maria pressed down, hands scorched but firm. "Property is fire now," she whispered, eyes glinting in candlelight, lips set in steel. Mateo fell backward, tripping over a chair. Butter glistened like molten sun across his hair and ledger. Gabriel whimpered, pressed against the wall, wide-eyed, the innocence of childhood lost in the scent of smoke and terror. Maria's breathing was steady. Her mind counted every motion, every strike of chaos. She poured the final ladle onto the colonel's black cane, the ivory tip melting slightly in heat. A scream pierced the hall. The music had long since stopped. Silence, heavy and trembling, hung like smoke in the candlelit room. Outside, the wind rattled the cane fields, echoing the hall's fury. Inside, the hall stank of burned flesh and fat, the metallic tang of blood mingling with the scent of herbs. Yet amidst the carnage, the lullaby lingered, humming through Maria's throat, a defiant cadence against cruelty. Diego closed the shutters, bolts sliding with a metallic click. Lucia moved among overturned chairs, checking doors, ensuring no witnesses lingered. Isabel pressed her hands to her face, shaking, trembling with a mixture of awe and horror. Maria stepped back, chest heaving, silver cross glinting. Hands scorched and bleeding, she surveyed the room. The colonel and his sons, broken, scorched, screaming, where the image of justice meted in fire. The lullaby hummed on. Chains rattled faintly elsewhere. Fernando, still shackled, listening beyond the walls. Maria lowered her gaze, swallowed the fire within, and let the room settle in chaos. The night swallowed screams. Silence followed, punctuated only by the echo of a child's song. The lullaby, humming over burnt wood, molten butter, and blood-stained floors. Tonight, Havana would remember. Smoke drifted over the outskirts of Havana, curling above charred cane fields. Rumors raced faster than the fire had. Some said the colonel's estate had burned entirely, a punishment from God. Others whispered that La Santa de Fuego herself had visited. Villagers walked cautiously past blackened timbers, hearing echoes of cruelty, the crack of a whip, the hiss of molten butter, the faintest hum of a lullaby. Isabel knelt by the riverbank, hands pressed to her mouth. She did what we only dared imagine, she murmured, eyes wide with awe. La Santa de Fuego. Diego's lantern swung in the breeze. Fear, reverence, they walk hand in hand. Some speak her name with hope, others with trembling. In Havana, the Spanish military moved swiftly. Soldiers in polished boots and saber belts patrolled the streets, rounding up witnesses and servants alike. Word came that Maria Alvarez had been captured. She walks among us, a sergeant muttered. Chains on her wrists, fire in her eyes. The trial commenced in the Grand Hall of Justice. Maria knelt in chains, silver cross gleaming against her chest. The judge, powdered wig sliding slightly, demanded a confession. Speak, girl. Explain these crimes. How many lives did you take? How many did you condemn? Maria's lips moved, but not with words of defense or plea. The lullaby escaped instead, soft, melodic, haunting. The courtroom shivered at the sound, murmurs rising like wind through dead trees. Fernando, brought to witness, limped forward under the eyes of soldiers. His chest tightened as the chains on Maria glinted, the cross heavy and bright. He looked into her eyes, reading patience, defiance, sorrow. I cannot save her, he whispered to himself, a tremor in his voice. Lucia was gone. Rumors flew. She had poisoned guards, slipped through cracks of the city walls, vanished into shadows. Some swore they saw her silhouette by candlelight at dawn, smiling at the chaos she had helped orchestrate. Padre Joaquin knelt in the corner of the courtroom, fingers wrapped around his rosary. God, he whispered, one blind eye toward the ceiling. Why do you allow this? To punish, to protect, to test? His voice trembled unanswered. The crowd grew restless. Whispers of reverence mingled with fear. Children pressed against mothers' skirts, faces pale, eyes wide. Merchants and soldiers avoided meeting her gaze. Some muttered, she is no ordinary girl. She is holy and terrible both. The judge banged the gavel. Execution public at dawn. Let all witness the consequences of vengeance and lawlessness. Maria rose as the sun broke the horizon. Chains clinked softly, silver cross swinging, catching the first light. Her hair was braided neatly, shoulders straight. She hummed the lullaby, a bridge from memory to defiance, sorrow to resolve. Fernando stood at the edge of the square, the weight of survival pressing on his chest. She is fire, he whispered, tears glinting on his cheeks. Fire for the unjust, fire for the forgotten. The crowd assembled, murmuring prayers, mutters, curses, awe. Some brought flowers, offerings, quietly laying them at the base of the gallows. Others crossed themselves, muttering, fearing the wrath of her spirit even in death. Maria climbed the platform with deliberate steps. She did not falter. Her eyes scanned the assembled crowd, lingering on Diego and Isabel in the distance, on Padre Joaquin kneeling and whispering prayers that would not reach the heavens, and finally on Fernando, chains rattling faintly, reminding her of shared endurance. A hush fell. The executioner adjusted the rope, the noose swinging slightly in the morning breeze. Maria's lips moved in the lullaby, each note steady, measured, hauntingly beautiful. The hangman signaled. The rope dropped. Chains rattled one final time. A breathless silence followed, broken only by the faint echo of humming, carried by wind across Havana. Some wept openly. Others whispered her name in reverence and fear. Outside the square, villagers spoke in hushed tones. She was fire, one man said. She burned the unjust and the memory of cruelty with them. Another, younger, clutched his mother's skirt. Do you think? She waits still, watching. Padre Joaquin, alone in his chapel, touched his blind eye and whispered to the empty room, If God did not answer, perhaps she did. Fernando disappeared into the streets, silent but determined, carrying the weight of memory, the echo of the lullaby, and the knowledge that chains could break. But fire could not be forgotten. Lucia's fate remained a ghost in conversation. Some said she lived, wandering among the wealthy and powerful, her hands both gentle and deadly. Others claimed she had vanished into legend, a shadow teaching fear as her master had once taught cruelty. The city slowly resumed its rhythm. Markets opened, horses trotted along cobblestones, and the scent of sugar and rum returned. Yet in whispers, in lullabies sung softly at night, in silver crosses pressed against chests, Maria Alvarez lived on. La Santa de Fuego, hero, avenger, martyr, legend. The story traveled first through whispers. Mothers in Havana cupped their hands around children's ears and warned, "Don't cross the girl with fire in her hands." Candles flickered as tiny faces widened, imagining molten butter, chains, and the silver cross glinting against her chest. In the cane fields, laborers paused mid-cut, muttering her name beneath their breath. Maria Alvarez, they said softly, part prayer, part curse. Each syllable carried fear and reverence. She became both warning and hope, a spirit who punished cruelty yet shielded the innocent. Some swore her cross had glowed as she died, a white-hot pulse against the early morning mist. Others whispered that the colonel's ghost lingered, butter-scorched skin clinging to his limbs, a reminder of the reckoning he had ignored. Children hid under benches, imagining him prowling the ruins of the estate, while the lullaby hummed faintly in the wind. La cocinera de sangre, the blood cook, was how poets later remembered her. Ballads were sung along Havana's docks, the lyrics soaked in cinnamon and smoke, sugar and vengeance. She stirred the pot, she sang the song, and those who burned, burned for long. Lines etched into memory, lines repeated by fishermen, by seamstresses, by children kneeling at the steps of churches, where Padre Joaquin had once whispered prayers. Doña Teresa's recipes became cryptic legends themselves. Housewives whispered that a pinch of this, a dollop of that, carried a spark of justice if misused. The butter pot, once an instrument of death, was drawn in children's games and tavern sketches, sometimes a symbol of protection, sometimes of fear. Even Spanish officials tried to erase her. Orders were sent, remove references, censor stories, punish those who whispered. But the wind of Havana was stronger than decree. Rumors thrived, transforming facts into myth. A girl with calloused hands became a woman who walked through flames unscathed. A lullaby hummed at midnight. A silver cross glimmered in the moonlight, and ivory canes vanished from families who dared to be cruel. Isabel, now elderly, sat by a flickering lamp in her small home near the riverbank. She was not just fire, she told a young girl. She was memory. She was justice. And she is still here in every shadow that moves, in every chain we dare not break. Diego, still carrying a crooked lantern, nodded in silent agreement. Havana remembers, he said. Even those who tried to forget her cannot. La Santa de Fuego cannot be erased. Fernando, far away, told travelers in whispered tones that her lullaby carried through winds and time. He described her hands, burnt and bleeding, clutching the silver cross, the flame in her eyes brighter than any torch. "It is not cruelty," he said, voice low, "that lives forever. It is justice remembered, sung, feared, revered." Artists and storytellers across Cuba took up her legend. Masks in carnival parades bore the mark of molten butter, dripping down a figure's face. Poems and plays dramatized the feast, the chains, the lullaby. Even the ruins of the plantation became a pilgrimage site for those who believed in the righteous fury of the oppressed. Some nights, fishermen claimed to see a woman moving along the coastline, hum of a lullaby floating with the sea breeze, silver cross glinting, eyes like coals. She watched over Havana, half saint, half demon. A ghost born from vengeance, nurtured by memory. And so the motif survived, the silver cross around her neck, the ivory cane broken on the floor, the butter pot transformed from tool to symbol. Generations grew up with fragments of her story. A reminder that cruelty can ignite fury, and fury, once kindled, becomes legend even now over a century later. Mothers still warn children, do not cross the girl with fire in her hands. And somewhere, in Havana's alleys or the rustling cane fields, the lullaby hums, carrying memory and justice in every note. Was Maria Alvarez a monster or justice itself? The question lingers like smoke over Havana, curling through alleys, whispering in cane fields. She was born into chains shaped by cruelty, tempered by loss. Each lash, each humiliation, etched memory into flesh and bone. And yet when she struck, it was not blind rage, it was reckoning. History rarely remembers the whip. It remembers the fire it struck. The chains forged silence, yes, but fire breaks it. Maria's fury was not born of pleasure, but of necessity. The lullaby that once carried tears became a hymn of defiance. The silver cross pressed against scorched hands symbolized not only faith but memory, hope, and the moral weight of action. There is a blurred line between victim and executioner, between survival and vengeance. Maria walked it barefoot and steady, teaching those who came after that oppression demands response, that silence is not innocence. The same hands that stirred butter over cruelty carried the weight of conscience, of ethical reckoning. Communities whisper her name as both warning and prayer. Legends paint her as saint and demon, savior and destroyer. And perhaps that duality is precisely the point. Morality is rarely neat, and justice is rarely gentle. Chains break in the mind long before they break in flesh. Fire consumes fear, exposes truth, and leaves memory behind. Maria Alvarez's story survives because it is not just about punishment, but about the courage to act when the world would see you kneel. In the end, the question remains, when faced with injustice, do we forgive or do we light the fire ourselves? If you were Maria, with chains at your ankles, with mercy stripped from your name, with every cruel laugh, every whip, every humiliation pressed into your flesh, what would you do? Would you forgive, turn your cheek, bend beneath injustice? Or would you light the fire? Let vengeance roll like molten gold over those who thought themselves untouchable. Pause. Let that question settle. Think of the lullaby that once soothed a girl in the kitchens of a plantation. Now imagine it rising again, humming beneath the chaos, beneath the smoke and flame, a witness to courage and defiance. The story of Maria Alvarez is not just history. It is a question handed down through time, whispered in cane fields, sung in shadows, remembered in silver and fire. Tell us what you would do. Comment your answer below. Share this story so Maria is never forgotten, so the lullaby hums for another generation. Subscribe for more dark, untold histories, stories of courage, cruelty, and the fires that burn in between. And as the screen fades to black, hear it again. The faint, haunting hum of a lullaby. A whisper. A warning. A memory that will not die.